Hi, everyone. Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at DryRun. And today I'm really excited to talk with a good friend, Greg Kautz of Black Owl Systems, CEO over at Black Owl Systems, a terrific, probably the best lease accounting software on the planet. So, but Greg and I got some really interesting finance topics we want to dig into today. Thanks for joining the show, Greg.
Oh, you're welcome, Blaine. Pleasure to be on your show. What we wanted to talk about today was finance transformation and what does it really mean?
Yeah, and we were talking right before we got on the show how like this is a really good topic. It's always topical, but it feels like now more than ever because I think there's been so much of a digital transformation that companies have gone through and CPA firms especially have gone through really since COVID hit, and all of a sudden people were forced online and onto Zoom and everything else. What seems to have gone along with that is all of the financial systems. Man, it's hard to have that financial system on the computer in the back of the shop now, right? Like it has to be going online. So what are you seeing? What's the first sort of stepping stone that gets people moving?
Well, it goes back to my past consulting career before I started Black Owl, and I was doing sort of a health check for financial systems, which was in translation, it was finance transformation. So, when I would go in and talk to a client, everyone's saying, do we need a new system? Do we throw out SAP? Do we throw out Microsoft? I'd say, hold the bus. We're doing finance transformation. We're trying to improve process. Let's just not throw out the ERP with the bathwater right now. Yeah. And so, the three things everyone says, well, everything in the corporate world is people, process, and systems. Yeah. And then it started to be people, process, and technology. What I started to try to introduce into that is two other components. So that is, the people, process, technology, and data and reporting, and then governance and controls. So when you're looking at throwing out that system that's in the back room, why are you throwing it out? Is it related to bad data? Is it bad reporting? Is it it doesn't have the controls you need? So that's where I view when we say digital transformation or finance transformation. It's a lot on the people, processes, and other information before we even look at the system.
And the interesting part, I've heard that sort of that string for the first time, but I think what's really interesting about it is it almost feels like that's the steps that a business will go through, right? Like do you have the right people in place, but then before you're starting to look at how do you actually make use of data in your business and KPIs and figuring out all that.
Right.
You don't have any data if you don't have any systems and processes in place. So it's interesting because then if you step in the door, sometimes they might, I'm guessing, be further along than they realize because it's like, yeah, you've got an ERP in place. You've actually got a pretty good bank of stuff. It's how do you unlock it and make use of it? How do you make it work better and actually give you information, right?
Exactly. And, just something specific with that is, I've had clients in the past saying, we need new ERP. This one isn't working. And this is or an accounting system. So this is from a small business to a large enterprise. I've seen examples of large global enterprises and they're re-implementing SAP for the 5th time. Well, why are they doing that? Because when they put it in, they thought it was good. It goes back to it was never set up right. It was never configured right. And why is that? Because they didn't understand the people and the processes they were trying to do. So you had that misalignment. So, what we're talking about today is not just for the large companies to say, well, even a small business, they want to improve something. So how do you go about improving it?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've seen in our business repeatedly is small businesses a lot of times. Like we deal a lot with sort of the multi-million-dollar businesses. That's the core of our business, and more established businesses but we can help anybody. And so we get smaller businesses coming in, and where we get really excited is when they're coming in and they're looking at taking the next step, and they want that transformation in their business. Not they want it, they need it. They're starting to realize there's cracks in the foundation. They're starting to grow quickly. what they used to be able to kind of keep track of in a spreadsheet or whatever is starting to crumble and starting to fall apart because there's too many moving parts. And it's interesting because I want to go all the way back to the first one, the people part, because what's amazing to me sometimes is you will talk with businesses, they'll understand the problem. They'll say, we're spending a bunch of time on this. We have really no optics. We don't know where we're going. We can't track this. We can't track that. And as you start asking questions and you find out it's because so-and-so doesn't want to change from what we've been using for the last 20 years. Right. And it's like the whole business comes to a grinding halt because of someone that hasn't bought in yet. So how do you, I guess it's one of the biggest things, like how do you get buy-in? Because it's uncomfortable for people, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to my past life when I was with an oil company back in Saskatchewan, and we were doing something quite forward-thinking back then. And what we were doing is we were decentralizing. So the oil company was centralized, and we were creating area offices. And what came with that was our business unit. So we were all sent to Lloydminster. We were making the accountants business partners, which was sort of, what are you doing? So, people would have their traditional roles. There was the AP, there was the revenue accountant, the capital accountants, the production accountants. And we said, nope, everyone has to wear all the hats. So all of a sudden we were creating these business partners. So this was revolutionary. A lot of people didn't like it. Some people said, give it a try. But what we were doing is trying to get the accountants more informed, more knowledgeable about the business. And when I saw success is, look down the hall and there'd be the engineer in there talking about their capital spend. And then the next day, the field foreman would be in there talking to them saying, my numbers don't make sense. And they, the accountant was sitting down there. So they became that central hub of information. It was that person. And that's how I see it is. We're so used to those traditional roles in accounting. And, and if something's broken, it's either the person or the system. All of a sudden, you've got a person to interpret the information, interpret those reports, and then they're talking directly with the stakeholders. So, that's something that I keep saying when I talk about this is, you want to change that accountant into a business partner.
Yeah, it's falls right into what we talk a lot about is the mindset.
Right.
One of our partners the other day mentioned that what they started to realize was they couldn't just tell their staff or their team members, go be a business advisor. Because some of them just, they didn't have the mindset and could not do it. And one of the things that she said was an earmark, is she says, we'd always look for people that were really curious. And it was just one of those earmarks that she found, is that if they found one of their team was really curious, they found that they would tend to ask a lot of questions of their clients and build on it. And guess what? They were drawing all this information out, and basically it just leads right into being a really good advisor because they're just naturally curious. And we talk about mindset just all the time, because we also know I know, like, if you're trained as a CPA, of course you're trained for historical penny perfect. That is the big part of the job. Yeah. So it is a big mind shift to go look forward. But it's interesting. I want to share this with you because I thought it was really an interesting conversation I had not too long ago with a CPA. And he said to me, he goes, I don't know how to get out of this historical mindset. And he's just talking about, I've been trained in this and blah, 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 blah. But he had his own business, like his own firm. And so I just changed the conversation. I said, well, what are you planning to do in 24? And this was back in 23. And so what do you plan to do next year? What's in your mind? Mindset shifted instantly. Suddenly he was talking about, I want to expand here, and I want to add this many more clients a month, and all of a sudden it's like, that's it. That's the mindset that's all you have to do to talk with your customers is ask them of where they want to go. And it's exactly how, he made that mind shift instantly. He can do that and talk with his customers in the same way.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I just flashed back to a situation when I was a CFO for an engineering company, and my controller was late with the financial statements. and oh, they'll be ready tomorrow. Okay, we're a day behind. Okay, and of course the CEO's banging on my desk. Where are those statements? Oh, they're coming. So I'm the middleman. And the second day, where are they? Well, we're out. We got a problem. I go, well, what's the problem? Well, from the revenue system to our ERP, we're out. Something's out of balance. And I said, well, how bad? Like typical accountant, you accrue it. Let's move on. He says, we're out 19 cents. I said, 19 cents? And he says, yeah. I put my hand in my pocket. I took out 20 cents and said, keep the change. It's balanced.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was him. He was that traditional accountant. He was there for perfection. It had to balance to zero. And 2 days. And to me, I'm going, why? But it was a good indicator that's saying, okay, this person, there's something there. I love the guy. He was great, delivered, but I says, okay, we've got to do things differently. So I had to change the way I worked with that person. Okay, so recognizing that he's a perfectionist, and it was early, in that part of my career, I says, okay, everyone's different. Okay, what are these roles? I go back to my oil and gas experience, business partner, and say, okay, we got to do things different here. So it just got me thinking about all the people. We've got great technology that we're using, but someone was trying to, and was it me not setting the expectations? So
it's this adoption, and like one of the things that I guess that one of the approaches that we take all the time is we're always trying to identify the champion. So even if we're talking with like an office, we're like, okay, we got to find who is the right champion. How do we get started? Who's there? There has to be one person that will take ultimate responsibility for implementation for a new system, right? And you want someone that's going to be excited about it and has that mindset and everything. It can be tricky to find, but it's so important to have somebody that just wants to lead the charge when you're doing something transformative like this.
Right. Oh, totally agree with that. Yes. And again, sorry about. What I'm saying is, that's probably the biggest thing for putting in a new system is getting that champion. Somebody who believes in it, sees the vision, because they're going to break down the barriers for that change that has to happen.
Yeah, and it's a risk for those champions, right? Like they take it on. You need that personality because some of them maybe don't recognize right away, but there is a risk because now everyone's watching them and everybody wants the success from the outside from us, inside from them, their superiors, everybody wants success. And in a way it's a little bit on their shoulders. And so they have to be a bit of that adventurous spirit, but if it comes off as a big win, it's a huge win for them as well. And I think that's the thing to emphasize. And I suppose if someone is being kind of is earmarked as this champion, what they need is that support from internally to be like, win or lose, we're going to give you credit for just putting the effort and taking a run at this. And when it's successful, celebrate that win, celebrate that win, whether it's small or big, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to flip it around to you is with that, having that champion, you must go into some of your clients and you don't have that champion. So you take on that role. So you're actually mentoring that person to become a champion.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. It's, that happens a lot. And it's more challenging, but also there's times where, you turn somebody into a massive champion, and that's also kind of exciting, right? And you just want to see that success. So, but it is someone that's just willing to take up the reins and run, right?
Yes. Oh, totally agree.
So now I guess I want to bring it back a little bit to the context of finance. So we're starting to talk about, okay, you're looking at bringing in new financial systems into a business. And now it's kind of tricky because sometimes the business is kind of like they're kind of trying to do this on their own. But a lot of times I'm guessing that it actually stems from their CPA. I'm guessing that's a lot of where it would come from.
Yes. So
how does a CPA, like what did you see when you were doing this before, like your observation of if you're a CPA and one of your clients comes in and says, we've been growing. That system's broken. We need this thing working. What are some of those critical steps that are just going to help them, not just like find the champion, but how do they identify and have some systematic way of going like, this is the right system for you, not just the one I want to sell or that I'm comfortable with. How do you identify what's right for them?
Well, it goes back to, the next thing in those 5 elements that I was talking about is the process. So people say, we've outgrown our system, we need it. Okay, so, I would work with those people and saying, okay, let's define what are your top 5 finance processes that you're trying to manage. So we'd step through that, sort of what I call day in the life. And you would walk through from where that information was initiated, whether it's sales or marketing or wherever, and then or order to cash from some purchasing where you've done an order and all the way to paying out the door. So you'd analyze those processes, and then you'd go step through and say, okay, where is with your current system that limitation? And so, so you would have sort of a map in your mind. Where are the hot spots? So then you'd go out to the vendors and say, okay, we want to demo the system. We're not letting them come in and do the standard demo. We're flipping and saying, here's a script. You show us how your system does that. So from a financial consolidation or a multi-currency translation, I've had some vendors very not happy with me because it shows the limitations of their system. The clients like it because you're not wasting time. If these guys can't do it, one thing I would say to all of the vendors is you're not going to show a standard journal entry because we know it all can do that. We know you can all make a payment. We know you can all set up a new vendor. Those things 20 years ago, those are important when you're starting to look at new systems because you didn't trust the technology. There wasn't the quality and the controls there is now for building new software. So, right away for that new finance system, you assume they can all do the basics. Show me why you're different.
Well, and the other thing that we of course see all the time is it's how they all have to play nice together. Like I said, 20 years ago, it's like, okay, we're going to get accounting software, right? But now everything has to talk to each other, play well together. And if it does, it massively improves the life and of not only the people in the business, but the quality of the data, the speed of that reporting and all of that information is so critical. How do you deal with that? And I guess this is a weird question or a bit of a loaded question, but how do you sort of future-proof that a little bit? If you're saying, okay, here's what they need right now, but as things get more and more technologically advanced, what might happen and what what might come down the road, and how do you account for that?
Well, that comes back to creating Black Owl. I want to use that. Our story there is we recognize that we had to have a solution that would interface and tie into any accounting system, whether an older accounting system or a new cloud-based ERP. And it went back from the fundamental design. So we knew that that's going to be something that we had to build for today and the future. So it all started with aligning with master data. What is key to managing those transactions? Okay, so we've got to be able to align to their master data because no one client is the same and no one ERP system is the same. Everything is different. So you have to have that flexibility. And then the transactions, when you're generating the transactions out, they've got to flow and be able to flow in. So, it's a, from a design perspective, it was a big lift for us to do that, which we did. But I've seen this, when I've looked at other digital point solutions in my consulting career, bringing in that, helping clients say, oh, we really want this. And, I'd be saying, no. One of my biggest victories, as I felt accomplished was a client was going to bring in a consolidation tool and it was going to cost them $1 million. And they were already down the road of doing this. And, a lot of their peers had this. And, I went through and I says, would you mind me spending a few hours and bringing a few of my colleagues and let us do an assessment before you sign that? Well, it ends up, a simple question is they wanted land information to consolidate. I said, well, land isn't a part of your financial consolidation. Well, what are you trying to do? Well, everyone wants to have land information with your accounting information. Yeah, there's a good thing. We can do other types of tools to gather that. And ends up, once they took a step back and looked at it, he said, no, we're not spending it. Now, I had a vendor not happy with me because they lost $1 million contract, but I was pretty happy with that client because they were going to make a decision, but they didn't understand what they're getting. And, that tool really wasn't integrated. It was, they thought they were buying something because other clients of mine actually used it and they're using it successful. And for them, I was just going, you're doing what?
Yeah, and that's that's the right thing to do. And you would hope that even the vendor would realize, like, it's $1 million contract, but if it's not the right fit, it's really not going to be successful anyway. And that's hard to walk away from that. But also the client, like you are on the client side, right? So that's an enormous win for you and them, right?
Right.
So, you mentioned Black Owl. I just wanted to sort of roll into that a little bit because this is part of, like, how did you come up with the idea for that? Because I know it's like there's a problem you identified in this financial transformation that led you guys to realize, well, there's a problem here and it's not being addressed properly.
Well, it goes back to, as you know, the story of Black Owl. The creator of it is my son, Derek. And he just saw a lot of the things he saw with the system he was working for, or the company he was working for, implementing a solution. There was a lot of things that you were just talking about. The technology wasn't quite aligned to the ERP was going in. There was bugs. It wasn't as smooth. There was a lot of manual workarounds still happening. So, this client bought a tool and it wasn't delivering. It wasn't doing what was its intended purpose. And, long story short, Derek said, I could build a better one. And from there, we took those learnings from where those challenges were. It could do a basic amortization schedule and kick out some journal entries. But to get there was a lot of pain that people were going through. Mm-hmm. And we said, hold on, maybe we've got an opportunity, we could build it better.
Yeah. And that's the thing is there's as much technology, people are awash in technology, right? Like everything is plugged in and binging and buzzing all the time. And, but there's still opportunity. Like there's still massive amounts of opportunity. And when you see how some things are done sometimes in business, it still blows me away. Like with all the technology we have, we saw a business not too long ago. They were sending out invoices that they were making in Excel, sending it out at the end of the month. And it was destroying their cash flow. And it was taking one of the founders nearly an entire day to comb through basically handwritten notes, create invoices in Excel, and send them out. Like, how are you? They didn't know what to start with. And once you're down the road, they just kept going with it. And it was just a monumental mess. And once you get past that, suddenly the pain can be gone in no time, right? It was just shocking to me.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot over my career, prior to, I've had a big portion of my career in audit. So working for corporations in internal audit. So in each of those companies, they had a variety of different types of businesses a part of those. And so I've seen a lot of different businesses. And I've seen that before, invoicing, when I joined that engineering firm, that's priority one is get those invoices out, and they were getting them out 30 days later, and, we were, day 3, those invoices had to be out was, when I left, that's where we were. But we were being approached once by a large engineering company to acquire us. And so, during part of the financial due diligence, we're comparing processes and all of this. And they wouldn't believe me that I was getting invoices out in 3 days. Their organization, they were happy if it was 40 days, to get the info. And I'm thinking, that's a lot of cash flow you're waiting for because you pay the consultant or the employee on day 1. Then you wait 30 days for that month to clear, and then it was 40 days after that, and then the client waiting 30 days. That's a long time, a period to wait for cash coming in where you paid for an hour months ago.
Yeah. And the amazing part is the client waits that 30 days, and it's like not very often.
Yeah.
Like there's a big chunk of your invoices where the client waits 45 on a net 30 or 60 days or 90 days. And yeah, like you're talking with some age receivables in a business like that, that would be annoying when it's 60 days, they may be at 180 just because of that. And that's staggering, like on a business. Like it's amazing how much that can grind them down.
Yeah.
And, businesses oftentimes think they're in better shape than they are because they may have enough capital, they may have enough money in the bank, so they don't think much about it. But imagine if you had that $500,000 in your bank today, or whatever's outstanding. You can do a lot with that. You can do a lot if you're moving that through.
Yeah, so it goes back to our whole topic for today is, there's a process improvement, whether it's through technology or for its process or the people, getting those out quicker. Because, waiting for the vendor to pay, well, that's outside their control. Well, sometimes you could have influence on it, and that goes back to the people issue. So, all of what, everything is so intertwined. It isn't just getting that new solution. It's using it right, having a good process along, and the right people to do it.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I'm guessing that like there's a lot of CPAs out there that are approached and asked for this sort of advice. And I'm guessing a lot of them probably don't feel equipped to actually do a full sort of audit of systems and processes and people and figure out how do we build that out, which is, I imagine, why you were a consultant at one point. What do you recommend? Do you recommend them sort of trying to build their own sorts of systems and processes internally to go, I can go in and make and do an audit and come up with, or should they outsource that, do you think?
It's a mix of both. It depends, goes back to the people. Some people have the skill set to analyze that. My best recommendation for anyone doing that is view everything lateral, not linear. So you've got to think process end to end. What's that? What are all the inputs and outputs and all of that? You start thinking that way versus, we're out 19 cents. We're out $1 here. It's that mindset. So, everyone, and just that simple thing, when I back in the day, coaching employees in that finance, I always said, now think of it as a process, think of it lateral, and I would push them and say, oh, where's the information came? Okay, well, where did that come from? Okay, is there maybe an issue where it came from? Why?
Yeah, it's it is, like you mentioned again, it is a bit of that mindset, and I think that's great advice. Is that you might be perfect for this, or one of your team might be perfect for this, but if you're not, there are people out there that you could likely bring in and add them to a project and make sure that your customer is highly successful. They're going to love you whether you do it or someone else that you bring into the mix. But if you help them, they're going to love you for it, and they're going to be so grateful to your services, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of resources out there to help you. I don't think there's books anymore, but everything's online and virtual. Yeah. But for the last over 10 years, for the CPA associations in Canada, I've been doing seminars on health check for your financial system. So I've been walking people through this process. I had one of the attendees say, "You're giving us our whole playbook. You're losing consulting." I says, "No, I'm here to train you, to give you the tools that you can take." And I always would start out saying, my PowerPoint decks are very detailed. I broke the rules for PowerPoint where there's supposed to be 3 words and all that. So I cram content on there so they can take it away as a toolkit.
Mm-hmm. And from experience, giving that away generally just leads to more work, because they'll look and realize, I really need someone that knows what they're doing for this. And so
right. Yes, exactly.
Good way to get jobs. We're coming up close on time here, Greg, but I wanted to now spend a few minutes just diving in and learning about the problem that you solved with Black Owl and why you're the best at it.
Well, great. So as I said, Derek was the brains behind it, and where he saw the struggle parts was that interfacing into the ERPs was one challenge. So where it was, and what was the reason for it? You go back, well, the master data didn't align. These systems come almost hard coded. Here's your choices for field. And I
Yeah.
said, there's lots of ERPs, and client can configure some of the larger ones many different ways. So we said, okay, we've got to offer something that's flexible, that'll meet any client's need, because they don't want, once it comes out of our system, they don't want to touch it again. They don't have to do any more manipulating the data. So, that was one thing. The other thing is we saw some of them saying, the system Derek worked with, it took 5 hours to run a report for journal entries. That's old school. I go back to my days in the 90s. You'd wait overnight to get a report out of your accounting system. Well, now today everyone expects instantaneous. So, that told us there was an architecture design. So when we were building our system, we looked at our data structure and architecture and saying speed should not be an issue. So how we accomplished that is the way we store and manage our data. Well, what that resulted in is superior audit trails. When we're giving demonstrations to partners at CPA firms across North America, they see how we manage our data and store that. It's a wow moment for them.
Yeah. So if and again, you're talking to a non-CPA here. Tell me a little bit about, like, if I was a CPA out there or even a business and I had leases, tell me a little bit about the problem, like why I need, first of all, to have some sort of lease accounting solution that's better than maybe what I've been fighting with.
Yeah. So, those people out there right now are probably, if they have leases and they have to follow the standards for ASC 842 or IFRS 16, they've got a solution now. They're either doing it in a spreadsheet, an elaborate spreadsheet, or they have another solution, whether it's a standalone or something partial in an ERP. But where the challenges get to is still, is it easy to put that lease in? And, can you do it in under a couple of minutes? Is it logical? It makes sense. Is it helping you understand where that lease is? Is it easily to be approved? But the biggest part is that month-end process where you're starting to get that information out of that system and get it into your accounting system. It should be a touch of a button, and that's what we focused so much of our effort on, that design, that whole life cycle of a lease, and how is it efficient? How does a user have it? We did a demo last week for a potential client, and he said, he's been using spreadsheets for the years, and he says, you know what? This is the first time I understood the standards. Thank you. He said, that wasn't the intent, but he says, I get it now. Like, he was just saying, I get it now. Okay, I see that. So it's a lot of that information. That's a whole focus from the design. And it goes back into this finance transformation we're talking about. Is it isn't just the system. It's it's got to be for the expert user to the non-expert user. You're managing processes.
Yeah, that's because I know we've talked in the past. I know you've talked about some of the new guidelines that have to be met, and this led to people suddenly struggling with this lease accounting problem. And I know you guys have come out further ahead because you made something that's easy to use, fast, easy to understand, and everybody values that, of course. How can people find you if they want to learn about Black Owl?
The easiest thing is go to our website, is Black Owl Systems with an S on .com, or look me up on LinkedIn. Greg Kautz, Kautz, and for my American friends, Kautz.
I get caught on that all the time as well. Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been a really interesting conversation. And I also want to mention again, I'm CEO, co-founder at Dry Run. If you're looking for a way to help your clients forecast their cash flow, model scenarios, figure out where their business is headed, and make it really clear and really fast, come and visit us at Dry Run, and we'll get you all set up. Thanks so much.